Upon Doriath, a heavy change had fallen. Melion sat long in silence beside Thingol the king, and her thought passed back into the starlit years and to their first meeting among the nightingales of Nan Elmoth in ages past. And she knew that her parting from Thingol was the forerunner of a greater parting, and that the doom of Doriath was drawing nigh. Hey guys, Yoistin here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are going to further our discussion about the Silmarillion and the timeline of Arda, as we get into the story leading up to and of the ruin of Doriath, the Sindarin Elven Kingdom of the First Age. This video will include the main points from the story of Turin and a few from the story of Tur, before the fall of Gondolin. But I have made some more extended videos about their tales as told in the Silmarillion. I'll link those and some other related articles and videos which greatly helped with the making of today's video in the description below and cards above, since our Timeline of Arda series covers the major points of the Legendarium while not going into great specifics. And I'll also leave our previous and first episodes of this series in those places as well. My friends, thank you all for joining me today. Let us begin our tale. 2 months before the Nargothrond, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears in 472 of the First Age, Tur, son of Húr, was born. His mother Rien would, after the battle, give Tur to the Sindar of Mithram to be raised, for she would go to the Hill of the Slain to pass away in grief, as she mourned for her husband Húr, who would not come to Hithlum anymore. Hithlum would then be occupied by the Swarthy Men, Easterlings, and eventually Tur would be enslaved by Lorgan, the chief of the Easterlings in 488. I'll get back to his story in a bit. Now, before all of this, in the year 464, Turin, son of Hurin, and the elder cousin of Tur, was born. Hurin, the lord of Dor-Lomin, had gone off to battle with his brother Húr in the Nargothrond, and he was captured by Morgoth. Thus he had not returned. When Turin was 9 years old, his mother Morwen sent him to live in Doriath, and shortly after, Nienor, the younger sister of Turin, was born. Now, as we discussed in the last Timeline of Arda video, Morgoth had set Hurin and his house to curse, and Hurin was forced to bear witness through the powers of Morgoth to such a curse. The son of Hurin, Turin, would bear the brunt of this curse, although the pains of the rest of the family should not be understated. Turin grew up in Doriath under the mentorship of the king, and became a warrior and friend of Beleg, the Strongbow, one of the march wardens of Ilu Thingol. However, the curse followed him, even inside of the girdle of Melion, and Turin accidentally drove the elf Maedhros to his death in the forest. Thus Turin fled the forest in 484, and he became an outlaw. Beleg would seek after Turin, his friend, for Thingol wished for the son of Hurin to come home, but the man would not do so. Rather, he stayed with his outlaws, and went on to journey to Amon Ruth, the last refuge of the petty dwarves of Beleriand. Beleg returned to Doriath, but once again sought to be with his friend, and was given the sword Anglakil by Thingol, forged by Eul the Dark Elf from a meteorite, to help him with this quest. In time, Beleg returned to his friend Turin, who now resided at Amunruth, with his outlaws and the petty dwarf Mim. The elf had brought with him the dragon helm of Dor-Lomin, the ancestral helm of Turin's family, and the two became quite renowned for their prowess in battle, as the stories of the helm and bow who resisted the thralls of Morgoth became quite a tale indeed. However, Mim, the petty dwarf, did not like elves, and would betray the location of the helm and bow to orcs, under the condition that Turin would not be killed, in 489. And it was so, for Turin was thusly captured and the rest were slain, except for Beleg, who was mighty and recovered. Beleg attempted to kill Mim, who fled. The elf once again sought for his friend, and furthermore, he would find Gwyndor, the elf of Nargothrond who was captured in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears and who had escaped the thraldom of Morgoth. The two went on to free Turin from the orcs who were bringing him to Angband, but in the confusion of Turin's rescue, the man took the sword of Beleg and, in the night, accidentally killed his best friend Beleg with Anglakil, which he would name Gurthang. Again, the curse of Morgoth had found him. But even in sadness, Gwyndor and Turin were forced to make haste and escape the orcs. Thus they journeyed to Nargothrond, the home of Gwyndor. They arrived there in 490, and over the next 5 years Turin would grow mighty in the councils of King Orodreth, and Orodreth's daughter, Finduilis, would fall into a perilous love with Turin. Now in 491, Tur, the younger cousin of Turin, who had yet been a thrall of the Easterlings, escaped and became an outlaw. In 495 he went to Vinyamar and found the gear left behind by Turgon, and he went on to speak to Ulmo the Vala, who gave him a cloak and told him to seek for Turgon's city, Gondolin. The man also met the elf Fëanor, who was a messenger of Gondolin, saved by Ulmo at sea, and Fëanor would lead Tur to the city. However, in the wild, at the pools of Ivrin, Tur caught sight of someone who he knew not. We'll get back to that in a moment. Now back in Nargothrond, in that same year, 495, the fall of the city took place, for an ill-advised bridge had been placed in front of the once secret kingdom by the council of Turin, and the dragon Glaurung attacked with many orcs. Gwyndor and Orodreth were killed, and the remaining elves were either captured or slain. Turin, however, was placed under a spell by Glaurung, and instead of protecting Finduilis as Gwyndor had told him to do, he set out to seek his mother Morwen and sister Nienor. Finduilis, along with other elves, was taken by the orcs, and she was slain at the crossings of Teglin. But once Turin got home to Dor-Lomin, he found that his home was empty, and his family had gone. After raging and killing the Easterling Broda, leading to more disaster in his homeland, the man left and then sought for Finduilis. In the wild, at the pools of Ivrin, Turin would come across a man and an elf, Tur, his cousin, and the elf Fëanor. But he knew them not, and cared not, for he sought the elf maiden. Tur and Fëanor went on to find Gondolin, and Tur delivered the message of Ulmo, stating that the doom of Mandos was nearing its fulfillment, and Turgon should abandon the city and leave for the havens of Sirion. In his pride, the Elf King would not do so, and Tur would abide in the city. We will talk more about them in the next episode of this series. Now back to Turin. The man would come too late to the forest Brethil to save Finduilis, and he would dwell among the woodsmen therein. Now Morwen and Nienor, who had come to Doriath, sought also for Turin, and made their way to Nargothrond with the aid of Mablung. The group would get separated, and the dragon Glaurung cursed Nienor to forgetfulness, and the woman ran off in the wild, to be found by none other than her unbeknown brother, Turin. The two fell into love, and were married in 498, for the curse had once again found them. Eventually the dragon Glaurung came forth from Nargothrond in 499, and Turin ambushed the dragon and slew him. But after discovering much sorrow, and that her husband was her brother, Nienor slew herself. Turin would unjustly slay another man, Brandir, and speak to Mablung before discovering all that had happened. Then he used the sword Inglakill that he had named Gurthang to slay himself also. Thus the curse of Morgoth upon Turin and Nienor, the children of Hurin, had come to its end. And so, after this was over, Morgoth freed Hurin in 499, who was now broken after so much tragedy. Again, through the powers of Morgoth, he was aware of all that had befallen his family. He first went to Dor-Lomin, his home, and after finding Easterlings and his kin who shunned him, he went to the encircling mountains, seeking once more for Gondolin, where he and his brother Hur had once lived for a time, under the care of King Turgon. Unknown to him, his nephew Tur now lived there. Yet word reached Morgoth of Hurin's coming, so then the Dark Lord knew the region of Gondolin's dwelling. Turgon, believing that the Hurin he had known was gone and had surrendered to Morgoth, did not let him in. Hurin eventually turned away, but pity came to Turgon, and the elves sent eagles to search for him in the end. They could not find him, for Hurin set out for Brethil and found the stone that commemorated his children. He too found his wife Morwen there, mourning for their children, and they had words before she too passed where her children were remembered. Hurin carved a memorial for Morwen in that stone as well. A seer and bard from Brethil named Glirhuin would make a song, saying that the Stone of the Hapless, as this stone of memorial was named, would never be defiled by Morgoth, nor thrown down. Thus Tol Morwen came to be, and that grave would never be sundered beneath the waves of the sea, and even in ages hence it would be an outland island off of the coast of Middle-earth. Morwen was never conquered. After this, Hurin went forth to Nargothrond, where he encountered Mim, the petty dwarf who scoured the riches of those halls. For his betrayal of Turin to Rambar, Hurin murdered the dwarf. From the treasures within the stronghold, Hurin found the Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves made for Finrod Felagund, and went therefore to Menegroth and Doriath. He came before King Thingol and Melion, and threw the necklace at the Elf King's feet to sarcastically thank him for aiding his son Turin. When Hurin had been in Morgoth's realm, the Dark Lord had always tried to put Thingol and Melion in a bad light. Melion, however, used her powers to break through Hurin's grief and madness, and some semblance of humanity came back into the man. He picked up the necklace and gave it to the king in a proper manner as a gift, for Thingol had done much, indeed, in raising his son and helping the family of Hurin. Hurin then left the Elven realm, and round the year 500 he drowned himself in the Great Sea. The tale of Hurin, Morwen, and their children is one of the most tragic and sorrowful tales in the entire legendarium, and it shows the true evil of Morgoth and his power to curse. That family of men depicted such great perseverance in the face of the most terrible evil of the world, and the fall of Morgoth is made all the more glorious knowing that the family of Hurin was avenged. We must not also forget that even though Dagor-Daggerath, the final battle, was an abandoned idea by Tolkien, it was Turin and his black sword that would kill Morgoth at the end of days, at least in some versions of the story. Anyway, back to our story. Curses were now laid upon oaths and dooms, for the Nauglamir was given to Thingol by Hurin, and the Elven King wished to put the Silmaril of Beren and Luthien into the necklace. Thus, the curse of Morgoth, oath of Fëanor, and doom of Mandos all came now into Doriath. In 502, Thingol employed the Dwarves of Nogrod to forge the greatest of creations made by elf and dwarf, for the Silmaril of Fëanor was placed into the dwarven necklace, the Nauglamir, once the necklace itself was remade. However, the greed of the two kindreds took hold. The dwarves laid claim to the necklace, for it had originally been of dwarvish make, and Hurin had not the right to claim it from Nargothrond. But Thingol grew deeply angry at this, as he himself had commissioned the joining of his Silmaril and the Nauglamir, and he desired the necklace for himself. Thus the dwarves slew the elf king Elwë, Ilu Thingol, who had seen the light of the two trees in Valinor, and had married one of the Ainur. They then took the Nauglamir in disgrace, but it was reclaimed by pursuing elves of Doriath. Two dwarves escaped the onslaught and told their kin in Nogrod somewhat of what had happened, and thus the dwarves of Nogrod made ready for battle. Their kin, the dwarves of Belegost, warned them against this action and would not aid them. The one most hurt by this incident, however, was Melion, who remembered fair days when she and her husband had met. She knew now that Doriath grew close to its end, and the girdle of Melion gave way. Evil could now enter the forest. She spoke only with Mablung, bidding him to take heed of the Silmaril and to send word to Beren and Luthien, who still lived in Assyriand. Then she went to Lorien in the Undying West to be with her kin. The Battle of the Thousand Caves and the sack of Menegroth took place soon after in 503, when dwarves from Nogrod invaded the forest, and Mablung was killed ere the Nauglamir and Silmaril were taken by the dwarves. However, on their return to Nogrod, the dwarves were ambushed by green elves and Ents during the Battle of Sarn Athrod, and the man Beren commanded the elves and Ents. He himself slew the Lord of Nogrod and recovered the Silmaril, the same one he had cut from the crown of Morgoth, and he brought the necklace to his wife Luthien after washing it in the river, and she was the fairest sight out of Valinor. Dior, the son of Beren and Luthien, thusly went to live in Doriath and become king, like his grandfather, and eventually the Nauglamir came to him, meaning that his father Beren and mother Luthien had died. Some say that living so close to a Silmaril hastened their ends, and Luthien had become too fair for mortal lands. Dior thus took up the Nauglamir, but eventually the sons of Fëanor sent word of their claim to the Silmaril of their father. They had dared not assail Luthien when she had worn the Silmaril, but now they thought it possible to regain it. Dior sent no word back to the sons, and so they attacked in 506 of the First Age, in the second kinslaying. It was a bloody battle, for Dior himself slew Celegorm, the very same elf who had tried to force Dior's mother Luthien into marrying him years before. Curufin and Carenthir were also killed. But Dior, his wife Nimloth, and their sons Ilurid and Ilurin were also slain. Elwing, the daughter of Dior, however, had escaped the disaster with a few other elves, and she took with her the Nauglamir, and thus the Silmaril to the havens of Sirion in the south. Thus Doriath was destroyed, and that realm never rose again. In this story, Morgoth was the only true victor. The Silmaril had gone to the south, and shall come back into the story when we continue to discuss the fall of Gondolin, Tuor and his son Eärendil, as well as the defeat of Morgoth. We shall cover all of that and more in our next episode of the Timeline of Arda, and we will finally close out the First Age. From the ruin of Doriath, we see how terrible promises, petty squabbles, and arrogant greed may lead to the greatest downfalls. If one is at odds with those whom they should call friends, it will only lead to sorrow. Rather, we should not let the worst parts of our natures get the best of us. Thank you all so much for watching this rather grim and sorrowful tale from the Silmarillion. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections about the ruin of Doriath? For me, it is sad to see how such a great kingdom of the Elder Days found its end. Old alliances between peoples and the lives of many good folk came to their ends over greed and selfishness. Anyway, please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon for a podcast and Discord server. Links are in the description below. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Adrian De La Tour, Chris Ortner, Peter Shepard, and Kyle Wetzel. It means so much to me. And thank you to all of our patrons. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with an epic character history on Elros, the first king of Numenor and the brother of Elrond. I will be making this to coincide with GeekZone's upcoming video about Elrond, as the two should work well together. Everyone, as always, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.